I previously promised I would do a video on the Rodrigues Solitaire, another bird that was also discovered by Francois Legat. Now it's not as interesting as Legat's giant, I'll give you that, but it's still quite interesting to note when this bird went extinct, because whilst it was similar to the dodo, it did go extinct a bit after the dodo on the islands of Mauritius. The Rodrigues Solitaire was described about 70 centimetres tall and weighed about 15 to 20 kilograms. It was grey and brown, and the female was paler than the male. It had a black band at the base of its hooked beak, and it had a very long neck and legs. Legat made this drawing in 1708 for his book, and this is the only drawing from an eyewitness that we have in existence. They were easy to hunt, and they were apparently quite tasty according to Legat, who says that from March to September they are extremely fat and taste admirably well. Now this is in direct contrast to the dodo, which apparently wasn't very tasty at all, but it was still quite filling. Now we didn't have any fossil evidence for the Rodrigues Solitaire until 1786, where fossils were discovered on the island of Rodrigues. But now the question remains of when did it go extinct? Now after 1691 to 1693, which was when Legat was on the island, we have a description from 1726 by a man called Julian Taffort, and he writes that the solitaire is a large bird which weighs about 40 or 50 pounds. They have a very big head with a sort of frontlet, as if of black velvet, so this backs up Legat's description. Their feathers are neither feathers nor fur, they are of a light grey colour with a little black on their backs. Strutting proudly around, either alone or in pairs. Now I find this description of strutting around proudly to be quite interesting, because there wasn't any predators on the islands of Mauritius, so the birds would literally just flaunt themselves around, they would strut around and wouldn't care when the people came up to them, because they didn't know that humans were predators, because they hadn't been biologically accustomed to this idea of being hunted, essentially, which is really depressing when you think about it, because that was one of the reasons why the dodo was so easy to be made extinct, because it was so easy to catch. And I think it's a huge, tremendous shame when we think of all these different animal species, some of which are not even described, that went extinct because of humans being essentially quite greedy, and also not fully understanding the concept of extinction in the 16 and 1700s. The Rodrigues Solitaire was described as still living in 1735 and was observed by a French lieutenant in the same year when his men landed on the island of Rodrigues. The next mention of the bird comes in 1740, where allegedly it was sent by French naval officer Bertrand La Bourdance to France. I find this source somewhat credible, but I do find it a bit suspicious that this wasn't mentioned until many, many years after the fact. In addition, there's no record of any remains being sent to France of this bird, of the solitaire, of the Rodrigues Solitaire, and there isn't any documentation from the time from 1740 to prove this, but I think it is relatively credible. In 1755, the French engineer Joseph de Cossigi attempted to obtain a live specimen of the Rodrigues Solitaire, and he had been promised that the Rodrigues Solitaire still survived in remote areas of the island. He lived on Rodrigues for a year and a half, and despite offering large rewards, could not find a single specimen. He blamed the cats for killing off the Rodrigues Solitaire, but he also suspected that it was due to hunting by humans, and because they were so tasty they were eaten in large quantities. French astronomer Alexandre Pingre also visited Rodrigues in 1761, and he wanted to find a Rodrigues Solitaire as well. He searched the whole island, but he couldn't find it at all. By the time the fossils were discovered in 1786, no living residents of Rodrigues remembered having seen live specimens. In 1831, a man who had lived on Rodrigues for 40 years, since 1791, said that he had never seen a Rodrigues Solitaire. Rodrigues is a relatively small island. It's only 40 square miles, making it quite unlikely that the bird would have survived undetected. So with all this knowledge, the extinction date is probably dated somewhere between 1735 at the absolute earliest and 1755. So this 20-year window. As always, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, that would be amazing. And I'll see you all in the next video.